Welcome back to another edition of the Draft Dynasty Podcast. My name is Jeremy Betz, and outside of the usual duo tonight, I've got something special for us here as we start a summer without Andrew Wilbar here on the DDP. That's going to be all right because we've got some great stand-ins ready to go. And starting off with a second-time participant on a show that I've done here, Archie Wilson from way over in New Zealand. Archie, how you doing tonight? How you doing? Ready to talk about some NFL draft, some running backs, some fantasy football.
Yeah, absolutely, Betz. No, thank you for having me on, man. Always looking forward to it, and it's an exciting class if you're a dynasty fantasy football fan. So excited to talk about it with you.
Yeah. Now, I play a little bit of everything from a fantasy football perspective. I don't know how you are. What's your favorite types of leagues to do? What's your go-to? Do you do dynasty? Do you do a redraft? What's your kind of go-to there?
Yeah. So personally, I've got 2 dynasty leagues running right now.
Okay.
So big dynasty fan. I also do a little bit of redraft, but I'd say dynasty's kind of my favorite when it comes to
Sure.
the fantasy football landscape for sure.
Have you done anything like any type of weird or different league? Like I tried a guillotine league last year where the lowest scoring team each week gets eliminated until you get down to the final two. And this was a 16 team league. So we went up to week 16 and that was our last elimination. And I got eliminated in week 9. So
Right.
it didn't last as long for me, but it was fun. It was interesting because you start to see how those teams are built. I did a best ball league as well last year, which was interesting too, because your draft strategies are just totally different. Have you done anything like that yet?
No, I haven't personally. The
Yeah.
first league you're talking about definitely sounds interesting. I've definitely
Yeah.
looked into best ball though, so that is something I might look into potentially starting up for the 2025 season for sure.
Yeah, all the ways I can play, I try to, and it
Yeah,
gets harder though every year because um, I'm just so busy with daily life, and then having like last year I was in 13 fantasy leagues, 3 dynasties, and 7 redrafts, and then uh a guillotine and 2 best balls. So
yeah,
the guillotine and best balls, it was more set it and forget it than anything, but
hmm
it was still pretty fun. Um, but
yeah,
the rest,
13.
it was too much. It was too much.
Yeah, it's almost like another full-time job basically.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. And it gets confusing too, because like your rosters, you're dropping guys that you're having to start in some leagues. So it does get a little overwhelming at
Yeah,
times. But
absolutely.
yeah,
I've
so
been.
let's cut to the chase here. Let's talk about these running backs because I know going into this draft process, we kind of as a general consensus in the draft realm, we were looking at this RB class as maybe an all-time class, as a group of guys that could jump in and you could find starters in day 3 of this draft, right? So let's talk about it from that perspective. Now that we know where these guys are at, um, let's start with Ashton Genty. He's a Las Vegas Raider.
Yeah.
How does that work in your opinion? The fit, and then what can we expect from him as a rookie, just to
Yeah,
start
so I
things off?
think Raiders was one of those landing spots that had kind of been chalked that if Genty fell to them, it felt as
Yep.
though that's where he would end up. And I mean, he's a generational running back. He headlines the class very well. He's got outstanding contact balance. He's able to break tackles with power, elusiveness, and he's got good vision as well. And then he's also got outstanding speed. So he's one of those guys that I believe as soon as he steps into the locker room will probably be a leader. He'll be the bell cow back, if you will. Um, and I think that whole offense is going to revolve around Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty. So it'll be an interesting offense to watch, having your 2 main playmakers being a tight end running back combo rather than having a
Yeah.
receiver in there. So yeah, I think he's certainly far and away the number one back in this class from a fantasy perspective and just an overall talent perspective, in my opinion, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. And the landing spot to me is just fine for especially for fantasy purposes, but also for his career. You get into a system right away under Pete Carroll. I don't know how long Pete Carroll's going to be there, but a guy who just kind of resets the expectations for an organization, kind of sets a floor for a team. We talk about how Mike Tomlin does that for the Steelers all the time. I've been talking about how I think Mike Vrabel coming into New England helps raise the floor of that team, and then you start adding talent there. Makes a lot of sense. Pete Carroll is going to be probably do the same thing for the Raiders, much in the way that Jim Harbaugh did for the Chargers last year. I think that's a good comparison here. And I know, Pete's not an offense guy, but when you talk about the types of game plans that he likes to put together, very run heavy, and the offensive line in Las Vegas wasn't too bad last year, especially when it came to the running game.
Yeah.
So let me ask this: 2022, Josh Jacobs for Las Vegas. He had 340 carries, 1,653 yards, and 12 touchdowns that season. Is that the kind of season we're expecting from Ashton Jeanty as a rookie? Or are we thinking maybe temper expectations on those numbers a little bit for year one?
I mean, he's got the skills to do it, and he is just a freak. But I think to come into the league first year and be able to pull off numbers like that, 1,600 yards, I think you said,
Yep.
that would be astronomical for sure. But then again, he is just an astronomical talent. So I wouldn't want to bet against it, but I would say maybe just temper those expectations slightly. He might be more around the 1,300 mark and 11, 12 touchdowns.
Yeah. Yeah. I can agree with that.
But
I think
and
I'm sorry.
Oh no, I was going to say then again, he's probably coming into a better situation from a coaching staff perspective. As you said, they've kind of got a culture changing coaching staff in there now,
Yeah.
and so yeah, probably a better situation too than what Jacobs was in.
Yeah. So, and I think they're going to lean on him, but I kind of agree with you. 1,600 yards is asking a lot. 340 carries. They've got Kazir White there still. They've got excuse me, is it Zaire
Zamir?
White? Zamir White. That's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Kazir White is a linebacker. So my bad. Zamir White. They've got him there. They've got they've got some guys who can help take the load off a little bit for Jeanty. So I don't think the 340 carries. I don't know if you're going to see that this year, but he's destined to be a bell cow for them. And I think that 1,200, 1,300 yards. I think the double digit touchdowns is definitely in play for Jeanty this year. And I think his usage in the passing game could be beneficial as well. So, um, uh, my expectation for Jeanty is a top 10 running back season as a rookie. Personally, is that kind of how you fall in for this as
Yeah,
well? Okay.
I would tend to agree. I think, as you kind of mentioned briefly, there the receiving game as well. I know it wasn't the hallmark of what he did in 2024, but I think if you look back at his 2023 numbers, he was a lot more of a receiver as well. So it's not like he's not going to be effective as a third down back.
Yeah.
So I think he'll get as many touches as they can humanly possibly give him, and it'll be in multiple different ways, whether that's in the pass game or rushing. So
Yeah.
yeah, top
Yeah.
10
I
seems
agree.
reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. Good stuff. So leaving Ashton Jeanty behind, let's as just our next point of emphasis here of the remaining guys. And let's kind of stick on day two for now. The guys who are drafted in rounds 2 and 3. Um, which player in that like next tier of running backs landed in the best spot for 2025 production, Archie?
I've seen it a lot, and I think it's probably fair enough to say RJ Harvey to the Broncos
Yeah.
might have been the best for 2025 production. I mean, he's going to an offense where there was a lot of talks of them taking Amarian Hampton at 21, I think they were picking.
Yep.
Um,
Or
so he's
20. Yeah. Right at
20,
20.
sorry, yeah. So Harvey, I think, is going to an offense where he pretty much will be the three down back. There's not a whole lot of competition. Well, there's a few names in there, but from a talent level, I think he exceeds any name in there and automatically leapfrogs to the number one position, number one on the depth chart for sure. So I think he, from a 2025 standpoint, makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think he's the best situation when you combine schematic fit and opportunity for 2025. Um, if you're gonna just look at schematic fit, I think Caleb Johnson's in that conversation too, going to
Yeah,
Pittsburgh, and we've documented that as Steeler fans on other shows, and we talked about him, um, post draft for the Steelers as well. So, but Caleb Johnson, he's gonna have to split time in that backfield with Jalen Warren this year. I think Warren's part of the plan in a big way for Pittsburgh. So I don't think you're approaching workhorse numbers for Caleb Johnson in year one. But I do think he's going to touch the ball enough to where he's going to be a viable fantasy back, especially as like a flex play, or even by the end of the season, maybe a guy that you're playing as an RB2, like a low end RB2 or a high end RB3, right? So
yeah,
that's kind of my expectation for him this year. RJ Harvey, my expectation for him would be probably RB2 numbers. They don't have anybody else there in Denver. Uh, they. I'm trying to remember who they brought in at running back that in free
Audric
agency this
Estime,
year.
was it?
Who was it?
Estime, is it? Audric Estime? I know he was on the
They
roster.
drafted him last year. Yep. Let me see here. I'm just going to search it because I think it's important to provide the context here.
Sure.
No, maybe not. Maybe not.
And I think that's why there was a lot of interest in him going, not him specifically, but the Broncos leaning into the running back market in round one.
Yeah.
There's just not a whole lot else on the roster.
Right. Okay. So it's my bad. Dallas brought in Javonte Williams, right, from last
Yeah.
year.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm thinking that's what I'm thinking of, but it was from Denver to somebody else, not somebody coming into Denver. So yeah,
Yeah.
RJ Harvey, I mean, he's clear path to the number one back, and Sean Payton wants to use him probably a lot like they use Alvin Kamara. This is a
Yeah.
guy you can probably get in the fourth or fifth round of your draft, and he could end up being an RB1 type potentially.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I think he's fallen into a good system with Peyton there as well, as you kind of alluded to. So he's definitely a name to watch for this season.
What about Amari and Hampton? They brought in Najee Harris in LA, but they drafted him in the first round. I mean, this is kind of like this is kind of like the Mike Tomlin saying two dogs, one bone, right? But I think that stylistically they're different enough to where you would use them in different situations. But does Najee Harris's presence hamper your enthusiasm about Amari and Hampton in year one?
Yeah, so it's interesting because Najee he's a running back one, like he can handle the load for sure, and we've seen that for 4 seasons in Pittsburgh. But with Hampton, he's obviously got that first round investment, and he's, from a talent perspective, was definitely worth that first round investment. But I would agree to say, even though the Chargers do run the ball a lot, especially under Harbaugh, we saw that last year.
Yeah.
I would say potentially for 2025, it's definitely a season where you could see a 50-50 split going in with between Hampton and Najee. I think there's just too much talent to just leave one to kind of just rot away there behind the other. So I think it's going to be a real committee focus.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I think that they're going to rotate those guys in. And I don't think either one of them is going to be like the designated third down back or the designated short yardage back, because Hampton's Hampton's not as big as Harris, but he's powerful runner between the tackles. He's got that next level explosiveness that Najee Harris definitely doesn't have. So, I just don't see either one locking into a specific role on the team. It's just maybe who's the hot hand, or maybe what matchup is this? Do you need the guy who's going to plot around and get you 3-4 yards of carry on every player? Do you need a guy who's going to be a little bit more explosive, and you make the decision week to week on that. So I think it's going to fluctuate Amarian Hampton's usage and therefore his opportunity to score points in fantasy.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so let's go ahead and take this part of the show. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about the running backs and then maybe give just some insights into some of the day 3 guys as well that could be some sleepers when it comes to fantasy this year and some of the situations that these guys are in. Don't go anywhere. The Draft Dynasty Podcast will be right back. And we're back here for the second half of this week's episode of the Draft Dynasty Podcast. Jeremy Betz and Archie Wilson joining you here to discuss the running back crop that just came out in this draft class here from a fantasy perspective, from a situation perspective. But let's dive in. I wanted to get a couple more of the guys taken on day 2 out of the way, Archie. A couple running backs we talked a lot about pre-draft were the 2 Ohio State backs. You got Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Henderson goes to New England in round 2, and so does Judkins to the Cleveland Browns in round 2. And just wanted to see your thoughts on which one's in a better spot, who has the higher upside for 2025, and maybe who's got the better upside long-term based on their situation as well.
Yeah, so I think between the 2 backs, my personal favorite that I had ranked high was Henderson. I valued the kind of change of pace that he could bring to a backfield and also his ability to be a third down back, not in just the sense that he can get the ball in the air in the receiving game, but also his blocking ability, which I know isn't dynasty relevant, but just to the fact that he is a 3 down back. I think, in my opinion, from a situation standpoint, Henderson is behind Ramondre Stevenson, who's just got paid recently or fairly recently. But I also think he kind of fell out of favor towards the end of the season just because he's got that fumbling issue as well. So I think he's almost one fumble away from Henderson kind of leapfrogging him in the depth chart as well. For Judkins, going to the Browns, I think he's probably going to be the volume back there. Like, he's going to get majority of the handoffs. And I think potentially from a 2025 standpoint, he might be the guy out of the 2 that gets the most opportunity. Just because I think he probably goes in as RB1 into the season, whereas Travion will be behind Ramondre just to start off the season, I think. So that's kind of where I sit with those 2. But from a long-term perspective, I'm more inclined to think Henderson might be the long-term play, if that's kind of where you're sitting at. If you're swinging for more upside for the 26-27 season, Henderson would be my guy between those 2.
Yeah, I think, and even by the end of the season, kind of like you mentioned, I think Henderson might have more of that workload share than he does early. So by the end of 2025, come playoffs, Henderson might be the guy for you there in New England out of that backfield that you want to roster. So, so I agree with that ranking. A couple comments I'll make. Quinshon Judkins goes into the better, like you were saying, the better opportunity situation, but all for 2025 specifically. But he also goes into the better schematic and offensive line situation for 2025.
Mm-hmm.
The Browns' offensive line beyond 2025, I don't know what that's going to look like, but for now, it's still pretty decent. And Kevin Stefanski knows how to put together a running game when he's got a healthy running back, and we saw that with Nick Chubb. Quinshon Judkins could be very Chubb-like if he gets an opportunity to run in open holes between the tackles. I think if it's schemed up for him, he can really take advantage there. So redraft leagues, I might go Judkins this year, honestly, because of that fact. But if I'm looking for long-term upside on Dynasty, I think that coaching staff in New England, this is their first year. They're locked in for probably the next 4 or 5 years with Drake May at quarterback at least. Kevin Stefanski, I don't know if this quarterback situation doesn't work out this year, if they go 3-14 again, I don't know if those guys are back. I don't know if Andrew Berry's back. I don't know if Kevin Stefanski's back, and that whole situation may look a lot different very quickly in Cleveland. So long term, I agree. Henderson's probably the play if I'm going dynasty. And I think he's going to give you enough in year one to make it worthwhile for that selection as well. Not somebody you're going to want to stash on a taxi squad. I think you're going to want to have him active for fantasy season this year. I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the speed backs that we thought were true change of pace players going into this and what kind of role we think that they're going to have this year. I look at Bashal Tutin going to Jacksonville, Dylan Sampson going to Cleveland, Jaden Blue going to Dallas, and then DJ Giddens going to Indianapolis. So that one's intriguing to me too, sitting there behind Jonathan Taylor. Which one of those guys kind of gives you the best feel when it comes to their situation to make an impact this year?
I think from a opportunity standpoint for 2025, I think potentially it's Bashal Tutin. I think the Jaguars room, it's obviously got Trev Etienne.
Yeah. Travis.
Sorry. Yeah, Travis.
Yep.
And then Tank Bigsby and then Bashal. But I think Travis has definitely not looked like the player that we saw in the first 2 seasons of his first few healthy seasons in the NFL. And I think the team has definitely lost a bit of faith in him. And I think kind of Bashal could maybe take some of those snaps away from him, especially if Tank's going to be the power back in the room. He's kind of more built for that kind of production there. So I think Bashal might be able to potentially take snaps away from Etienne and be the explosive change of pace back that the Jags obviously were looking for. And I think they obviously did invest in him quite high as well. But he's another guy, when I look at the fumbles, he's just a worry when it comes to fumbles as well.
Yeah.
Whether they're going to trust him and give him enough playing time because of his ball security. That's probably my biggest worry with Bashal and a lot of the other speed backs.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that that's one of those situations that gives you pause when you're looking at, could he be one play away from not seeing the field again for a week, right? Maybe he gets the starting nod, or not a starting nod, but maybe he gets the nod in some situations in some games over Bigsby because they need somebody on the perimeter a little bit more speed out there. But he's got to work through 2 guys that are vested in that offense ahead of him, and that do different things. Now, Travis Etienne, this is probably his last ride in Jacksonville. So long term, maybe if Tutin can put it together from the fumble side of things, he's got some upside for down the road in like a timeshare with Tank Bigsby. So I could see you playing that route. I wanted to say Jaden Blue going to Dallas because they do like to run the football. And I think they're going to want to under Brian Schottenheimer a little bit more than they did under Mike McCarthy as well. But when you look at that room, it's pretty crowded. Javonte Williams, and then Miles Sanders is there now too. And he was an RB1 in fantasy 2 years ago or 3 years ago. When you're talking about his stints in Philadelphia and Carolina, there was some good stuff going on there. So this is really an RB by committee there. So let me present to you the guy who might have the most opportunity potentially, and probably the better handcuff play if you're looking for 2025 work, and that's DJ Giddens, because Jonathan Taylor had a monster season last year, 1,400 plus yards, and it doesn't even get talked about really. This Colts offense is going to run the football with Anthony Richardson as your quarterback. You have to run the football to make him more effective. If DJ Giddens were to ever get an opportunity, whether Taylor, yeah, sorry, whether he gets injured or something along those lines or needs a spell, DJ Giddens could be the guy that steps into a pretty big role right away. So he'd be my sleeper of those guys to have maybe the biggest season in 2025. Taylor's had some injury history, there could be an opportunity for Giddens to really jump out this year and have an impact.
Yeah, 100%. I think he was a guy I was certainly higher on than where he went in the draft. Giddens, I really liked the patience that he ran with, and I think his physical traits as well. They're all there. He's a good athlete. He's got good size. The one thing I did want to see from him more was if he was to come into a different situation was to be able to use that size a bit more. But I think you are right in saying that if Jonathan Taylor does go down with an injury, like we've seen throughout his career, that I think DJ Giddens could potentially be the guy to take the load and also surprise a few people because of his skill set. I think he's quite raw, but I think he's got a lot to work with. So, yeah, I think behind a good
Yep.
offensive line and obviously a part of a good run game, he could
Yeah.
definitely flourish.
Yep. Absolutely. Just a couple guys I'll mention real quick before I get to the next guy I really want to discuss. Let's see. Jordan James going to San Francisco. I think that's a great fit. I think that the McCaffrey situation health-wise is one to watch, and he could be the next guy in this list of Shanahan backs that gets an opportunity and just goes nuts, racking up yards, scoring touchdowns. If given the opportunity in that run scheme, I like what he might be able to bring to the table. We talked about Travis Etienne for the Jaguars. His brother Trevor going to Carolina. Again, Jonathan Brooks isn't going to play this year. They've got Chuba Hubbard, who just got paid. They don't have Miles Sanders anymore. So Trevor Etienne steps into a pretty good spot there as well to get touches. And then Devin Neal in New Orleans. Alvin Kamara is another year older. We didn't really see it with the kid that they drafted a couple years ago. The name's escaping me for him. Do you have
Kendre
that in
Miller?
front of you, maybe? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So maybe Devin Neal gets an opportunity in New Orleans with that offense in flux and a new head coach. He has a chance to at least make a mark in that conversation. So those are some under the radar guys that I wanted to mention real quick. Any thoughts on those guys before we get to the next big name that I want to talk about?
Yeah, I think Jordan James, he's another guy, as you kind of
Yeah.
mentioned, that I think we've seen in recent history, as soon as McCaffrey's gone down, one of these lower end running backs that come into the 49ers system has just absolutely gone off for 3 or 4 weeks. So whether you pick him
Yep.
up towards the end of a draft or if you're in rookie draft season in your 3rd or 4th round, that could be a guy that gives you flex or even RB2 type numbers for a flash in the pan, maybe 3 or 4 weeks that wins you matchups. So that's
Yep.
definitely a guy worth taking a swing on. I'm not sure if this was a name that you were going to get to, but Damian Martinez.
Yeah, talk about him. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that I was extremely high on through the process. He was a violent runner. He's ran in both gap and zone schemes through his collegiate career, and I just think he was kind of stereotyped as a power back, but I think the kind of explosiveness that he runs with is super exciting as well. Like he's able to get to the edge and erase angles in a blur for
Yeah.
a guy his size. Obviously, he is stuck behind Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and Kenny McIntosh right now, so he's one of those guys that could be a taxi squad stash. But just wanted to
Yep.
show him some love quickly.
Yeah. Good stuff. I like bringing him into the conversation here. Absolutely. And then the other big name before we get out of here that I just wanted to hit on real quick because he had a lot of pre-draft hype and he was kind of polarizing as well because some people didn't know what to do with him. Was he a flash in the pan player in college? Does he have the athleticism to make it work in the NFL? And I'm obviously talking about Cam Scatterbo going to the Giants. He's got to play with Tyrone Tracy over there. So I think that there's a pathway to snaps for him. Does his game translate enough to the NFL? And is this offense going to be good enough to where he's a guy that we will be able to rely on for some type of fantasy production in 2025? Or is this more of a future play for Dynasty if you were to go after him? What's your feel for Scatterbo? He's kind of the one guy that of this group seems to have the strangest mix of potential opportunity and skill set that's just polarizing enough to where it could be a really good thing or a really bad thing this year for Scadaboo.
Yeah, I mean, he's obviously in the running back room with Tyrone Tracy. I think Devin Singletary's still there.
Yep.
And then obviously himself and Tracy probably being the lead back, but he was super inconsistent last year. So I think there's definitely a road for him to kind of get more volume as the season goes on. He's an interesting prospect, man. Like, he's a volume back. That's what he was at Arizona State. He's a guy that just demolishes people in the contact zone. He bounces off tackles. He's a smaller guy, so he's almost hard to bring down because of that lower center of gravity. He can move pretty well. He doesn't have a lot of high end traits, but he's just a fighter. Like, he's one of those
Yeah.
guys that's just going to fight and fight. So from a fantasy outlook, I'm not sure. I wasn't too sold on Scatterbo as a player, but I think he could be a guy that definitely wins over the hearts of a Brian Daboll throughout the season, just because of the
Yeah.
way that he carries himself on the field. He's a bit of a leader off the field, and the room around him, like Tyrone Tracy, showed some good things, but had some fumble issues. He was a receiver coming out of college, so he's very raw. And then Singletary seems like a bit of a placeholder now in the
Yeah.
NFL. So yeah, interested to see what you think as well, though.
Yeah, I could see a late 2024 Najee Harris type role for Scatabo in year one, where by the end of the season, Jalen Warren was taking more snaps than Najee was, but Najee was still grinding out the early down yards, right? And just kind of being there, super reliable, 3 to 4 yard guy who may get out there and break one if he can bust through a tackle, or try hard through the offensive line enough to get some extra yards. And Scatterbo reminds me of that type of player. It's not going to be easy for him at the NFL level. He just doesn't have the high end athleticism, in my opinion, to be super explosive, outside the numbers or home run hitter or anything like that. He's going to be a grinder. And that may be just fine for what the Giants need. I think where he's really going to help is on third down. I think he's going to have opportunities to be out there because he's pretty good in pass pro and because he can catch the ball and do things with that in space. So he might end up being one of those guys where it's like, it's more of role based, but week to week, he might be able to give you some flex consideration in 2025, in deeper leagues, especially. I'm not necessarily saying like a 10 team league, but maybe a 14, 16 team league in redraft. If you're looking for a guy who can give you maybe a double digit outing, because he catches a lot of passes in PPR, and gets on the field a lot on third down, that makes some sense to me for a potential role for him. So,
Yeah, for sure.
all right. Well, I think we kind of hit this pretty much in full. Did you have any other players that you wanted to talk about real quick before we close this out?
Just having a look through here. Obviously,
Yeah.
people know that we both like Caleb Johnson.
Yeah.
We didn't talk too much about him, but he's definitely a guy with the. I think he's going to get good volume as well, as we were kind of talking about. But seeing him in mini camp, he just looks like
Well,
a
yeah.
beast. Those, even though you don't learn anything from mini camp, I know, but when you just see him, he looks NFL ready. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited for him. Another interesting name was Ollie Gordon.
Yeah.
I
For Miami. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't really know if he's gonna have any fantasy value whatsoever, but just I thought the fit was so interesting with him going to Miami, which is normally track athletes, and he's kind of the complete opposite. So
Yeah.
I
It
just
was
thought,
definitely a departure from the norm for
yeah,
them.
I just thought that was an interesting point to make, was that he was
Sure.
once a Heisman, kind of preseason Heisman candidate, and then had a poor season last year, had a few things off the field, and yeah, he's ended up in a situation which seemingly doesn't fit his skill set at all. So I don't know, just an interesting
Yeah.
one.
Very interesting. The other guy I wanted to talk, just say his name real quick, is Kyle Monangai, going to Chicago. DeAndre Swift, is the lead back there. Roshan Johnson's kind of behind him. Neither of those guys inspire much confidence as full season RB1s for Chicago. So maybe if he has a good camp, if he has a good preseason, he could put himself on the radar there for a lot of snaps. I think Chicago's probably a team you would peg to go out and get, like a J.K. Dobbins or Nick Chubb as the season gets a little closer. So I'm not like throwing all my stock behind Monange, but I think that he's got an opportunity, at least potentially, if he can show some things early in the offseason program that might make the Bears think twice about adding an injury-prone veteran to the group if he can kind of jump out there and be the guy that Ben Johnson can rely on. And we know Ben Johnson wants to run the football. And we know he tried it with DeAndre Swift and it didn't go so well. So I think he'd be much more willing to move off of Swift faster than maybe some coaches would be if it's not starting to work. And Monange's skill set is interesting enough to where he's got an opportunity to have some run potentially for this team. So Archie, let the listeners know where they can find you on social media. If you got anything coming out on the website, tell us a little bit about it, and we will close this one out.
Yeah, no, so just on X or Twitter, whatever you call it, just @Wolves_Steelers. I don't have any articles coming out right now, but just had one recently about potential Steelers that, could be interesting if they were to go to the Olympics as a part of the flag football team. So I thought that was a bit of fun. So have a look there, but yeah, that's about it from me.
Good stuff. Go on ffsn.com and check out my series on the like draft recaps for each division. I've been going through those. I've got my fourth and final one going out, talking about the AFC and NFC West. That'll be rolling out early next week. So stay tuned for that. Tune into your team shows. If you're a fan of an NFL team, we've probably got your podcast or your site connected to FFSN. So go check it out. Archie and I both write and cover the Steelers. And so it's a lot of fun. We have a good time at FFSN, and Fans for Sports Network is your one-stop shop for all things NFL, NFL draft, fantasy football. We've got you covered here on the Draft Dynasty Podcast. Archie, thanks again for joining me, man, from a weird time for you. I know you're in the middle of work, so I appreciate you making time. And listeners, we hope you have a good rest of your week and a good weekend. Happy Memorial Day in the U.S. Keep drafting, everybody.